Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So it's a little bit windy, but I think it's all right. I think it's gonna work out for us. If you will, just let me know if there are any issues with the audio, the volume, the quality, sound quality, any of that. I would just really appreciate your feedback on that. But I hope you guys are having a good day today. And I just wanted to share with you, we're going to be covering the last part of the prologue in Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces today. So that's what we're going to be doing. And, when I read the prologue, it's sort of, and I'm not sure if this is his intention or if this is really correct, because I haven't obviously gone any further to verify. I feel like at the end of the book we'll be able to verify if this is true or not, but at the end of the prologue it's kind of starting to come together like it was an overview of the hero's journey, but just very, very simplified. And so what I was able to do is utilize this last portion of the prologue, which is called the World Naval, as inspiration for the message today. So we're going to talk about that part, but we're also going to pull it into our journey with regards to leaving toxic situations or relationships, environments, and how I think it's important when you remove yourself from a toxic situation to understand that your feelings are fully engaged, because it's like a fresh wound, right? And so I feel like because of that, even when you're trying to process everything that you went through, you're doing so through the lens of these heightened feelings. And even when you're trying to pull in logic, it's kind of like when you're coming from that place of being hurt, you're going to take that wisdom in differently. You're going to, for example, if you're listening to someone who's trying to explain, maybe they're further down the path and they're trying to give you hope and encouragement. Well, you may be listening to those words of wisdom through the lens of these heightened feelings, right? Through hurt. And you're going to hear what that person is saying differently, right? Because it's like pain and hurt listen differently, right? And because of that, you may miss some very important points. And it's just, I feel like it's something that you just have to, it's a process. It's something that we have to just go through. And after going through this myself, I've come to the understanding that I feel like there are two stages of processing after you leave toxic situations. You have your first stage of processing, which is important. Ideally, you would be able to recognize that it's truly the feelings that need to be processed first, but this first stage of processing is, regardless of what you're focusing on, is going to be through the lens of your pain. Okay, and then the second stage of your processing is going to be when those feelings are starting to, what's the word I want to use? They're starting to, I want to say die down, but shift more into peace, right? So they're not as heightened anymore. And because of that, your lens now that you're viewing all of the books you're reading and the wisdom you're hearing from other people who've been there, things like that, you're going to perceive it differently and with more accuracy. So 2 stages of processing. I just want you to keep that in mind. And so let's say you're in that second stage and your old life is in the past. And it's kind of like, now what? And, some things to think about as part of this second stage processing, I feel like, is just re-examining through reflection, not ruminating, because in that first stage, it may have been more akin to ruminating when you're trying to, reflect and get the lessons. It may turn into ruminating, and a lot of us can get stuck there, right? But the second stage of processing and healing is one of more, it's reflecting. It's reflecting. So we're at a point now where we understand that we aren't better off tolerating strife and drama, or we're not better off alone. It's kind of like, all the things that we tolerated to try and fit some kind of mold of expectations in our past. We understand that didn't serve us, and in fact, it may have put us in harm's way, right? So we're basically eliminating tolerance, because when you're doing that, it's sort of like sitting on a fence with regards to values. Okay, once you get clear on what matters in your values, and you have conviction there, I don't feel like you're going to be sitting on that fence anymore. So tolerating is just not going to be part of your new life, right? Maybe to a small degree when you're talking about cooperation with someone you love that you truly are equally yoked with. That's just kind of life, just tolerating small things. I'm talking about you're no longer going to tolerate mind-twisting type conversations and psychological abuse and things like that, right? And it's good to be alone for a while too, right, to process, but you get to a point where it's like you start feeling inside that you want more. You want to engage in this life again. You're ready to engage in life again, and so even that kind of a conviction, you can let go of, and you can say to yourself, I'm not going to tolerate being alone. I'm going to use this as motivation to get up and off the couch and go explore and see what's out there, right? What kind of opportunities are out there for my new life. We're no longer going to pretend that we like people or things or situations or whatever it is that don't bring peace, right? We feel a freedom to take a blunt, unapologetic approach to life, and that's just part of, I feel like, a natural result. It's a natural result of coming into this conviction, because you are now aligned with your higher self or that inner guiding light. It blesses you with this certain level of conviction. And so it's like I said, it's you just embrace it wholeheartedly, right? And people may view you at that point as being blunt, quote unquote, but that's okay, right? So in the spirit of processing what we went through now, through the lens of a healed perspective, because our feelings have been honored already, right? You have to honor those feelings first. Now we can reflect. Now we can reflect with logic, and that's where this last part of the prologue was really interesting to me. And it was something I never heard of before, so please know I'm not an expert by any means. But I just read through and I thought, I want to share this. I want to share this with you guys. So basically, the world naval concept in the prologue is going to be good for us because it's going to give us insights that support our disengaging with not the world, right? Which may have been what we thought we wanted to do in that first stage of processing. But now that we've dealt with the feelings and we're in the second stage, it's going to be supportive. What we're going to go over today is going to be supportive for intentional disengagement from the drama of this reality, this world. Not the whole world, but just disengaging from drama, right? So just a real quick overview as a reminder of the hero's journey. If you remember, it's circular. So it's going to start with, I guess if you're watching this, it's going to go this way. I'm not sure. But it's going to start being born into the drama of life, which is really like the birth of our ego at some point. And so it's, excuse me, excuse me, it's operating through the lens of the ego, which, you know, at this point, there's a lot of projection, and we know we have the shadow part of our psyche where, you know, we're unable to see our own thoughts sometimes, and instead of seeing it inside of us, we see it out here, and we're creating situations that we don't realize we're creating in our life. And so there's all these dramas, right? And it's not just us. I mean, a lot of it truly is coming from other people too, that's creating drama and issues in our life too, right? It's just when there's a lot of heavy engagement with the ego, right? Both your own and others' egos. So that's the first stage, right? And what happens is these dramas of life serve a purpose. And that purpose is to eventually become a catalyst for our change, for us to start this adventure, this spiritual journey, this growth, soul, evolution, whatever, however you want to call it, whatever lens you want to use with it, right? So these dramas at some point become so burdensome and troublesome and heavy and chaotic and bizarre and all this stuff that it forces us to cross. So you have this circle, right? And then in the middle of the circle is this line. It forces us to descend down. And a lot of times you're going to see this in these stories and fairy tales as going into the underworld, or like in Frozen, going into the cave to immerse yourself in the river, which is very symbolic. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in just a little while in the message. But essentially, we are descending down, crossing the threshold into the underworld, okay? And that's where we're getting real with ourselves. That's where the ego death happens. And it's where, and it's a process. It's not simple. And that's where I feel like these stories, if you are truly a truth seeker and you truly want to learn, it's not something that you can demand. It's something that has to be an ask, a request from your soul, and it has to be earnest. And that's where that Bible verse really kicks in, and it says, you know, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. That's what's happening after you've crossed that threshold and you're down in the underworld, okay? And so this is typically your time of isolation and searching and also processing feelings. So this is your first stage that I was talking about, of processing. All right, so then you're going to return, you're going to come back up, you're going to surface, you're going to cross that threshold again back into the, you know, the reality of this world, but you're going to return revived and changed. And I need to read more to be sure if you at this point already have what's called a bounty or a boon or a prize, or, you know, whatever this grand gem is from your adventure, if you already have it as soon as you cross the threshold, or if it takes a little bit more work. At this point, I'm inclined to say it takes a little bit more work, and here's why. Because it's said that this bounty is not for ourselves, it's actually for the world, which is kind of interesting. And so I feel like when you come back up, you surface, you have to process through logic, because your feelings have already been dealt with, right? And then I think at some point you learn, it's kind of like Elsa Again, she had the powers to freeze everything. She would just throw her hand out, and she would, ice would just form. And at first, it was very dangerous. She didn't know how to use her powers. That's kind of how I see us, as like a little baby Jedi, a baby ninja warrior, samurai. You know what I mean? It's like we've been endowed now with something really powerful, this awareness, but we don't know how to use it. So that's where it's like, just like when babies are born, because it's related to birth. It's a rebirth, and so babies have to learn, right? You have to crawl before you walk, and it's the same way with us. And the problem is we want to go from crawling to walking when we're down here in the underworld, still hashing it out with our feelings, and it's too early. We're not ready yet. So the surfacing back across the threshold has to take place. Okay, so yes, so that's very important, and I think that taking the time in your place of peace to process all of this is very important in the second stage of processing. What is it that makes us extra tolerant of things we should have never tolerated? You know what I mean? In one sense, it's positive just to say, well, I can tolerate a lot, I can take a lot, because I'm empathetic or whatever. You can apply so many lenses to this. But another lens would be, this is where you get real with yourself. Maybe it was our ego that made us tolerant. And it's not because we think we're, all that great because we can tolerate stuff, but it's because we don't want to admit reality. We don't want to relinquish our subjective lens. Why is that? Because it's our subjective reality that tells us how things should be. So you're at war within yourself. The lovely train horn. Hopefully you can hear me. So we're at war within ourselves between what is in a person. Maybe they're choosing to lie and deceive us and just engage us in confusing circular conversations, and they're choosing to do this, but we don't want it to be that way. So in that sense, we are resisting reality because we don't want it to be that way. That's what I mean by we're caught up via our ego, because we want things to be a certain way. We believe that they will get to the point of being as they should be. Does that make sense? Again, what we're doing is we're denying this law of nature, which is created by God, and that's free will. We can't do that. We have to understand that's part of this reality. Free will is part of this reality. And another person can choose to do that, to operate, by getting their kicks off of frustrating us or lying to us, and living a double life and wearing a mask. They can choose to do that. Okay, so as long as we are struggling with how things should be, that's the hook. That's the snare. I feel like when we transcend that threshold and we cross over, but we go under, we're going to take a look in just a minute at what Joseph Campbell describes as the tree of life. I think it's Yggdrasil in all the myths, the old myths. But at the bottom of the tree of life is a river. And a lot of times it's symbolized by a serpent, which was really interesting to me. But this river that's underground in the underworld is described as an abyss. And I view this as, if you apply it symbolically, I think it can be viewed as a point where we can merge ourselves with the abyss with regards to emptying or pouring out all of our old expectations, how things should be, that we were holding on to, like with this death grip for so long, not realizing that we were destroying ourselves, just the same way a person who is toxic and lies and deceives, they're going to end up destroying themselves. Well, as long as we're holding on to hope that, free will doesn't exist, and, and this person's going to see the light one day, and they're going to stop, living a double life and hiding things and deceiving people and getting their kicks off of, frustrating people and all these horrible things. As long as we're holding on to this the way things should be mindset, we're going to destroy ourselves in that process too. So to descend into the underworld and just like in Frozen, stick our feet in that river of the abyss, that's your ego death. That's your ego death. That's where you say, all right, I've got this heavy vessel of water, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour it out into the river, into the abyss, and it no longer is. It no longer exists now. I got rid of it. I let go. Let it go. It's a place of surrender. And it's also in the underworld the place where, how does he describe it? He describes it as the inexhaustible wellspring. So it's also the place of creation, which is interesting. All right. And then supporting darkness at the roots. I thought that was interesting, that it's not just darkness, but supporting darkness, which alludes to the fact that the darkness serves a purpose in this world. And I had an old art teacher. She was really interesting. She passed away a few years ago. I loved her art. She would do these paintings of related to Greek mythology, and a lot of times the figures in her paintings would be holding this vase or vase, and it would be huge, and they would have it usually up here over their heads, and it would be full of water, and sometimes they would be carrying it, and anytime they were carrying it in her paintings, they were like hunched over, and it was heavy and burdensome. And then there were other paintings she made where they were pouring it out, and you could just tell by the we used to call art, describe art as being dynamic. Just there was this fluidity all throughout the art piece that just suggested that when the water was poured out, that you were now, or this person, the character in the painting, was now aligned with the flow of life, which is letting go, which is embracing those cycles, life, death, and then life again, which is the hero's journey. So it's letting go of your own expectations of how things should be when they conflict with reality. Because reality is that every person has free will, even to engage in the darkness. But you have free will to disengage yourself from being entangled in that darkness, and also dying to that life force energy because of it. You see what I'm saying? So, hang on, y'all. I'm having several thoughts come to me I didn't plan on, and now they're gone. Maybe they'll come back. But this has been very helpful for me, and I just, I wanted to share, hoping that it's helpful for you as well. So, sometimes what keeps us in the drama and these battles with the darkness in this world is, we talked about our ego. Sometimes we can fool ourselves and call it passion or purpose, and we have to be careful about that. So as far as how things should be, we have to also be aware that we can even self-convict with the would'ves and the should'ves. I should have done that. Man, I wish I would have done that, or this or that. And so it works both is where, I wish things would be this way out here, and I also wish I would have done this or that. So, just something to keep in mind. And then what's interesting, when we are in the underworld, right, metaphorically, when we surrender these expectations, we may expect it to feel like losing, but the unexpected beauty is that, and it's surprising, it can be surprising for it to feel like relief. And you can apply the spiritual lens to this, the religious Christian lens to this, and when it's talking about laying our burdens at His feet, how that gives us freedom, and I'll drop some Bible verses down in the description. I'm having some come to me that relate, but I don't want to misquote them. So, but yes, sometimes that's surprising. It doesn't feel like a loss, because it's not actually a loss. It was a lesson. All of it, lessons. So this is interesting, okay? Why does it feel like a relief? I put, it's accepting that our reality is constructed of various bricks, and each is different. Just like that song, all we are is just another brick in the wall. And there's actually an image if you Google. Let me see, I wrote it down back here. I'll try to pop it in here and show you, actually. Yeah, if you look up Philosopher's Stone, there's a little image that says, it shows the two humans enclosed in a circle, which we're going to see is related to something that Joseph Campbell is writing about in a minute, about the tree of life. But they're enclosed in a circle within a brick wall. And then you think about the lyrics of that song, and it's kind of like each one of us is a brick, metaphorically, right, in the wall of this reality. And so it's kind of ironic, because in my last video I was talking about how if the bricks aren't constructed properly and you try to build a building with them, it's might look pretty, but it's not going to last. And I think that sometimes when things are kind of crazy and chaotic in our world, we're hearing lots of things on the news. Sometimes we almost expect this reality to crumble at any moment. My dad even recalls hearing his grandparents long time ago, right, talking about, he was a kid and he would listen to them talking, on the porch, and how they would say, I don't know, I just don't think this old world can go on much longer. And that was way back when, and it's still rocking along. So, I don't know. But it feels like when reality, each of our realities isn't cohesive, and it's constructing this reality that's actually very chaotic because of that, it doesn't feel like it's sustainable, does it? But the truth that I've had to come to terms with is that each of us employs a different lens of perception. And because of that, instead of viewing reality as one reality, it's almost like there are multiple different realities. We talk about objective and subjective, but maybe our objective reality is made up of however many people there are in the world, so many billions, of subjective realities, and that's what creates reality, right? There's this scene, I was reminded of this right this second. I'm not sure why or how it fits in, but I'll go ahead and share it with you. I was reminded of this scene. They made a movie too, out of the book, but this scene isn't in the movie. This scene wasn't described in the book. And the book is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, which I've referenced before, but it's a really great book. And it's kind of, my understanding is that it's kind of nonfiction and fiction blended of his life experiences, but like I said, a little bit of fiction blended in. And so, which I thought was interesting that he took that creative liberty, you know? It's like, why not? Life does feel surreal sometimes. But in the end, and if you don't want to hear this, then you might want to skip this part. I'll give a thumbs up when I'm done talking if you just want to mute it, okay? But in the end of that book, the mentor in the story, the guru, older guy that's mentoring the main character that plays Dan in the story, he goes into another room. I think they're in his house. He goes to the bathroom or something like that, closes the door. It's been many years since I've read it. Closes the door, and the main character is waiting for him to come out. He's waiting. And all of a sudden, he sees this explosive, bright flash of light from under the door. And it's really supernatural and strange. And so he opens the door and he's gone. And, you know, a lot of esoteric type of, I don't even know the right terminology to use, trains of thought, go into discussions about density with relation to ascending, like spiritual ascension, and how physical density may be related to. This is just to help expand our minds, okay? I'm certainly not trying to state any of this as truth. just a discussion, just a casual, you know, casual chat. But it's almost like, you know, when we're talking about, even in the Bible, talking about our burdens, how they feel heavy physically, they can feel, and how, you know, spiritual ailments can manifest in the physical. I mean, a lot of us have experienced these kind of things, so maybe there's some validity here. I don't know, but the point is that when you are super entrenched in the ego and attached to particular expectations in this world, you know, outcomes that in your mind have to be this way, and you're not flexible, you're rigid, and you're easily offended because things are not going to go your way all the time. It's just reality, right? Then you're living a very burdensome life, and therefore you're dense. You're very dense and heavy, right? Versus someone who has let go, poured out, let go of the ego and all of its expectations, and therefore they feel lighter. And it's almost like, as part of that ascension, getting lighter and lighter, you turn into light, right? Which God is described as light, you know. And if we're part of God spiritually, then that would make sense, right? Theoretically. So I thought that was kind of a cool little scene in the book. Yeah. So, yeah. So I'm done now. I'm done. You can unmute it. Okay. All right. So yes. So that image that I showed earlier, the Philosopher's Stone, it's like the wall is our reality, and then the circle around the people is interesting because that's mentioned, the symbolism of a circle with regards to our life and us, each individual person, you know, our own lens. I mean, our lens. I know I'm not trying to give some kind of, I know people say sometimes doing something like that is some kind of hand gesture. I'm just saying, like back in the old days, they used to wear like one lens, like a spectacle, I think they called it, right? But anyway, all right, so now we're going to look at the tree of life that Campbell describes. And I'm just gonna, I actually did a little drawing here, but it's really not good enough to show you all. It was just a quick little sketch in my notebook, but I'm going to describe it to you. So just imagine, and maybe if you want to draw this out in your journal, this is a good time to pause and go get your journal, because you can sketch it out based on what I'm saying. Okay. So he describes this tree of life, and this is my perception. Maybe I've got this wrong, but this is my understanding. So there's this tree of life, and in the middle of it is this circle, which is called the immovable spot. Okay, so you have this tree, and it's just, all fluffy up here, and it comes down, it's got its roots down here, and right in the middle of the tree trunk is this immovable spot. And this is where the hero is. And he describes that, us here as the incarnation of God at the world navel. Okay? So think about our navel and the umbilical cord, which he talks about. It's related to birth. It's related to, if it's the world navel, then I view this as the lens with which we look upward at the tree of life, our experience here in this human form. It's like our biases, how we see everything, okay? It's our lens. It's our lens of judgment, perception. This is just kind of my take on it. And then as you start to move down the trunk and you go underground, you're going to run into what they call the waters of the abyss. And this is represented by the serpent. So you can draw like this big snake with waters inside the snake. That's what I did. And I just wrote waters of abyss. Now, under that are the roots. And you can write supporting darkness. Supporting darkness. And then underneath that, and I'm not sure if I have these layered properly. Maybe you can find this image online. But at the very bottom is the inexhaustible wellspring. Okay. So then moving up the tree, going back up, past the immovable spot up into, the leaves, the branches, that I labeled as the drama of life. All these different branches, and, God says, I'm the vine, you are the branches, right? I think that was a quote from Jesus. And so it's like the drama of life. All the different people, all the different subjective realities that are going on, competing out there, all that stuff. And then at the top of the tree is what they call a golden sunbird. And I guess this translates differently with regards to different cultures, but I view this as maybe the phoenix, which symbolizes rebirth. Okay, so, and I just found that really interesting. So let's read a little bit here in the book. Let's see if I can find the part I've got marked here. And let's see if we can start to put some of this together. All right, so this is section 4 of the prologue on page 40, called The World Navel. The effect of the successful adventure of the hero is the unlocking and release again of the flow of life into the body of the world. The miracle of this flow may be represented in physical terms as a circulation of food substance, dynamically as a streaming of energy, or spiritually as a manifestation of grace. And this reminds me of, I mentioned manna in my last video. I think that's related here. It says, an abundant harvest is the sign of God's grace. God's grace is the food of the soul. The lightning bolt is the harbinger of fertilizing rain, and at the same time, the manifestation of the released energy of God. Grace, food substance, energy. These pour into the living world, and wherever they fail, life decomposes into death, right? Where there's resistance, it's there's going to be decomposition. And then this is interesting. The torrent pours from an invisible source, the point of entry being the center of the symbolic circle of the universe. And I would view this possibly as the immovable spot, meaning our subjective reality, our subjective lens, our own perceptions may actually be the center of our universe, because it's how we view everything, right? It translates everything in our minds, so possibly. So I'll say this again. The torrent pours from an invisible source. The point of entry being the center of the symbolic circle of the universe, the immovable spot of the Buddha legend around which the world may be said to revolve. And I feel like this is where, again, we have to be careful where our perceptions are rooted, because this is where we can misunderstand things through the lens of pain and hurt, okay? And then he goes into talking about, he expands on this, the divine life, creative energy, and all this stuff. It's just really interesting. And then a little bit further down on page 41, it says, for the hero, as the incarnation of God, is himself the navel of the world. Yes, the umbilical point through which the energies of eternity break into time. Right. Thus, the world navel is the symbol of the continuous creation, the mystery of the maintenance of the world through that continuous miracle of vivification which wells within all things. And then he expands on that, relating the circle to a nest, and how it says the circles also stand for the kinship group, the clan and the tribe. So this is how you find your own kind, who you're aligned with, because your perceptions are aligned, your values and things like that. Okay. And then over on page 43, it says, wherever a hero has been born, has wrought, or has passed back into the void, the place is marked and sanctified. A temple is erected there to signify and inspire the miracle of perfect centeredness, for this is a place of the breakthrough into abundance. Breakthrough, yes. Someone at this point discovered eternity. So I view this as being born again, and it's said that our body is a temple, and it's kind of like you can't enter paradise unless you become as little children again. All this is relevant here, right? So very interesting. And then he goes into a lot that's super interesting to me on page 44 and 45, and it's a lot to read. I'm just going to encourage you to get the book here. But he goes into the story on page 45 of these people that are arguing over seeing. It's farmers that saw somebody go down the road in a hat, and they're arguing over what color it was, and each one of them is absolutely sure what their eyes saw. They're like, I saw it with my own eyes. I know it was a white hat. And the other one's like, I know it was red. Are you crazy? So it says, you must be blind. You must be drunk. So it says the argument developed into where they were, fighting. And so the neighbors had to take them before the headman for judgment, right? And it says the headman sat at a loss to know where justice lay. So the old trickster, the one who came down the road in the hat, he was a trickster, see? He revealed himself, made known his prank, and showed the hat. The two could not help but quarrel, he said. I wanted it that way. Spreading strife is my greatest joy. So then Joseph Campbell says, where the moralist would be filled with indignation and the tragic poet with pity and terror, mythology breaks the whole of life into a vast, horrendous, divine comedy. Its Olympian laugh is not escapist in the least, but hard with the hardness of life itself, which we may take it is the hardness of God, the Creator. Mythology in this respect makes the tragic attitude seem somewhat hysterical and the merely moral judgment short-sighted. Yet the hardness is balanced by an assurance that all that we see is but the reflex of a power that endures, untouched by the pain. Thus, the tales are both pitiless and terrorless, suffused with the joy of a transcendent anonymity regarding itself in all of the self-centered, battling egos that are born and die in time. I thought that was kind of cool. So that's the end of the prologue. Yes, the wind has turned my pages, so I'm struggling to get back to where I was. So if we're seeking peace, right, you know, that ego death has to happen. And you can relate that to removing that brick, your brick, from that wall, right? From the wall of the chaos where there's battling egos, in the words of Joseph Campbell. You can just take your brick out, right? And by doing that, you have now essentially relocated yourself to a new reality. You know, and sometimes drama serves only to justify itself because it is what it is. Because it is what is keeping a certain reality alive. Exactly. The only way that old reality even was able to keep going, however long it did, for years or whatever, is because that drama kept going. So you just have to, you know, remove yourself. You have to relocate. Now, when you're at that point and you're doing your healing and you feel your feelings and you have an ego death and all this stuff, and you view things from the victory and through the positive lens, and you know, you understand that there were many lessons to learn from it, and it actually ultimately turned out to be a blessing. When you get to that point, I don't want you to get discouraged, because I just would encourage you to not make the mistake of first trying to see the new land as you're relocating yourself, right? Before you jump. Here's why. It can't be visible until you leave, which is symbolized in these stories as the wandering stage of the hero. Remember it said seemingly aimless wandering? It's not actually. It feels like it's aimless wandering to us, but it's not actually. It's only seemingly aimless wandering, right? We have to understand that's a stage. It's a process. And yes, we have to, while we're in this in-between stage, we have to navigate very carefully. But at least we have removed those distorted lenses, right? We don't have those on anymore. Why is it a process? Why is the new reality not already there? Because it's waiting for you to construct it. It's waiting for us to create it. See, we have the spark of creativity in us. That's part of the greater fire of destruction and creation. We can choose when to end a cycle of drama. We can choose when to create a new reality. It's within our power. And that's a big part of the awakening, right? Yes. So in other words, this new reality will unfold as you go because you're creating it. And there's no need for a ton of worry and anticipation and self-doubt, because you are the one creating something new, right? And of course, if you have a spiritual practice, then you would probably view this as a co-creation with your Heavenly Father, with your higher self, your inner guiding light, the Holy Spirit guiding you, as opposed to your ego that may have led you in the past. So just different ways to look at this, but essentially that's just a beautiful gift from the numinous part of existence, right? That we do have that power to create this new reality. And so I just hope that you're encouraged. Don't get caught up in anticipation or doubt. Just try to stay rooted in peace, and just breathe and just know that you got this. So I hope this has been encouraging, inspiring for you today. I hope that it's got the wheels turning for you and giving you a lot to think about. And I just hope that you have a beautiful day. And I'll see you again very soon.